Which NBA team needs the number one overall pick the most in the 2026 NBA draft? Let's talk about a good old-fashioned tank rank on this episode of the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings, your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast your first listen of the day. We're part of the number one sports podcasting network, the Locked On Podcasting Network. I'm your host, Nathan Grubel, scout and evaluator over the last 15 years. And current No Ceilings contributor solo show today. On today's episode, I'm going to examine which NBA teams need the number one overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft the most, while also offering some notes on where these projected lottery teams' young cores currently stand in the league's landscape. So let's set the scene for today's podcast. I'm recording this on December 29th, so utilizing the current NBA draft lottery standings by record, projected to have the best chance or one of the four best chances at the number one overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft would be the Indiana Pacers as it sits today. That's followed by the Washington Wizards, the New Orleans Pelicans, who would be giving up that pick in the best of swap between the Bucks and the Pelicans. That swap would go to the Atlanta Hawks. The Sacramento Kings fall in after that at fourth. The Los Angeles Clippers would surrender that pick to the Thunder as they would get the best of a swap between themselves, the Houston Rockets, and the Clippers. Washington gets the worst of that swap. The Brooklyn Nets come in at number 6, followed by the Charlotte Hornets, the Dallas Mavericks, the Utah Jazz. That pick is top 8 protected. It would go to the OKC Thunder if it falls outside the top 8. Plenty of words on that later. The Portland Trail Blazers, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Hawks, who the Spurs actually own an unprotected swap with the Hawks. And then to round out the lottery would be the Memphis Grizzlies and the Chicago Bulls. So a lot going on there. Obviously, several teams who, if we would have taken a look at this landscape a year prior, so before some of the season-changing injuries that have happened, for example, the Indiana Pacers would not be looked at right now as a team with the number one odds or tied for the top odds, I should say, in the 2026 NBA draft race. That to me is crazy, but Tyrese Halliburton's out for the season. They obviously did the massive Miles Turner move with the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks were able to ultimately make some different roster moves and sign him. So they lost Miles Turner, no Tyrese Halliburton. The Pacers sit at number 1. But as I mentioned, this is a good old-fashioned tank rank. And how I want to view this is we can look at this two ways, right? We can evaluate this top landscape by who just quote-unquote needs that star player the most. I think by direction, the Brooklyn Nets would certainly qualify as number 1 in that spot. They obviously need a star player, and I'm going to talk about the Nets a little bit in our second segment. But how I wanted to actually approach this exercise was, if X team got the top overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft, how significantly could it change their franchise outlook in terms of, could they actually contend for a play-in or even a playoff spot next year if they added that top caliber player, plus obviously make a few other additions to round out the roster, maybe some veteran moves, etc. How quickly could a team ultimately rise if they got in that number 1 overall pick added to the franchise? And so if I'm taking a look at this from that perspective, I am really interested with what the Washington Wizards are currently building. So this team, as it stands today, they're last in the NBA in net rating. They're 27th in offense, 30th in defense, 6th in pace. Very interesting combination of metrics. They're 62.8% scoring at the rim, which is 22nd in the league, 43% on mid-range attempts, which is 17th in the league, and 35.7% on three-point attempts, which is 18th in the league. They're 10th in defending opponent shots at the rim, 19th and 21st respectively in defending mid-range shots, and 3-point shots. So a lot of different things going on with this team. But as it stands right now, their current young core, you have Alex Sarr, who's a second-year forward/center. You have Keyshawn George, second-year bigger wing initiator, shooter, playmaker. You have Trey Johnson, a rookie who has really come on strong over the last few weeks as a shooter, secondary pick-and-roll operator. You have Bilal Coulibaly from a few drafts ago, Bub Carrington, and Will Riley, really rounding out where that core is going. If I'm looking at the Washington Wizards today, their biggest needs, obviously the number one thing that sticks out to me, I've talked about this in a few podcasts now, whether it's been on this Locked On Podcast Network or a few that I've actually guested on, they need a definitive answer at point guard. CJ McCollum, their current leader, not going to be on this team for forever, could very well be moved at the deadline, could be bought out. Bub Carrington hasn't necessarily stepped up to prove that he's that long-term answer at that number one overall point guard spot. This team needs that definitive building block because in order to evaluate the rest of the talent on this Wizards roster, you need someone who can operate with the ball in their hands and actually make the other players around them better. And that means being able to pull the levers at the same time of when do I need to hunt for my own shot versus when do I need to get someone else a look in one of their best spots to be able to operate. So you need that type of player in order to evaluate the rest of the talent on your roster. And then obviously I would also target some backup or additional center depth at the starting spot. Maybe you move Alex Sarr to the 4, you play him alongside another big, or you find another big, maybe not necessarily at the top of this draft, but at a different point in the draft or in the free agency market, someone who can play behind Alex Sarr and really offer some great front court depth. I know Marvin Bagley is doing his best job at that backup center spot right now, but I think they need a better answer. And it wouldn't necessarily hurt this team to look at some different lineup constructs and try and figure out a player who could fit alongside Alex Sarr as much so as to back him up. But if we're looking at the top 3 projected players who could make a name, make a race for that number 1 overall pick really interesting, it's AJ DeBansa, the wing out of BYU, Darren Peterson, the guard out of Kansas, who's currently injured right now, has some hamstring issues, may potentially end up being shut down for Kansas. We don't know enough about that situation yet. He's only played in 4 games. And then Cam Boozer, who's putting up a National Player of the Year caliber season, the forward at Duke. All 3 of these players, incredibly interesting prospects. It is truly a number 1 race for that top overall pick. I mean, it's one of the best races that I can remember. I've been doing this, going on 15 years scouting prospects for the NBA draft. This is one of the best races for the top overall spot I can remember. But if Washington were to land any one of these options that I laid out, if you're getting Darren Peterson in there for the Wizards, he provides that blend of scoring, shooting, playmaking that would complement the current core of dribble, pass, shoot options. I talked about guys like Keyshawn George, Trey Johnson, Bilal Coulibaly. He really complements them well by taking nothing off the table and only adding more versatility in that backcourt. He could be an explosive 2-man game partner with Alex Sarr. He can bend defenses working out of handoffs. He can operate and pick and roll. He can get Sarr touches, off those entry passes where Sarr's actually been doing a really great job of operating in the middle of the floor, even without a reliable point guard option outside of CJ. And when Bub is on the court in point guard / true playmaker mode, listen, if Darren Peterson was able to slot into this backcourt, I mean, you're talking about injecting so much talent into what already has been a very fun core to watch, a core that's developing in the right directions, a core that's being built off 2-way versatility, dribble, pass, shoot, defend. You're getting one of the best backcourt options in this draft, arguably the best backcourt option in this draft. If you're injecting Darren Peterson into that lineup with someone like an AJ DeBansa, he would provide an immediate upgrade over Bilal in that wing spot, offering versatility defensively with steady coaching / reps. We've talked about the defense numerous times on this podcast feed, how he has some really excellent on-ball skill as a potential lockdown defender. But when he's in that help position, when he's on that back line, when he has to be that roving help defender, alongside a big man, there can be some lapses sometimes where he loses focus And teams are able to take advantage of that, pick apart, get to the rim, and get some easy baskets when, if AJ would have been paying a little bit more attention or would have been a little bit quicker in recognizing when he needs the help, when he needs to rotate over, could be preventing some of those baskets, especially in the half court. But with more coaching, with more reps defensively, AJ could be an awesome defensive option for this team while providing them another jumbo wing that can handle, create downhill pressure. He can operate in the middle of the floor and find open teammates in the half court. Has been doing a lot of that at BYU of late. And then Cam Boozer would be an ideal power forward partner alongside Sarr. He could play a real high-low game out of either spot, stretch the floor. He offers versatility in different 5-out lineup combinations. He can operate as a passer in the middle of the floor, and he can really play to this team's fast-paced style as arguably the best hit-ahead passer as it stands today in college basketball. I've talked about this at length on other social media channels, but just because a team plays fast doesn't mean they're always creating efficient offense. And what Cam Boozer does as a hit-ahead passer, he's not just moving the ball for the sake of moving the ball and just getting everyone out quicker. He's throwing that pass to the best available scoring option in transition. He's going to find the guy who is in the best spot to get that bucket on the break. You have an intelligent passer like him, both in transition and in the half court. He just makes everyone else around him better and significantly raises the ceiling of a team's overall offensive output, like you're seeing him do at Duke. Without Cam Boozer on the floor, without a guy who can score in a multitude of ways, a guy who can not just make the right pass, but pass guys open, without someone who can significantly improve the rebounding efforts in the front court. I mean, this Duke team would not be where they are today without someone like Cam Boozer. So you inject any one of those three guys into this Washington Wizards young core, you make a few veteran moves around the margins, make sure you have the right leaders in the locker room around these young guys. This is a team that could make a significant leap sooner rather than later. And I say significant, I'm not necessarily saying that the Wizards would emerge as a top 3 player in the Eastern Conference, for example, but I could see this team getting into the playoff race and maybe even getting into the playoffs out of the play-in next season if they got one of these 3 guys. If I'm projecting who would be my favorite fit out of these 3 for the Wizards, I personally really think Cam Boozer would bring a lot of versatility to that team, would take nothing off the table and only add to what this team's currently building. But Darren Peterson as well would be an incredible option in the backcourt and could really give this team a direction at point guard that this franchise doesn't currently have on the roster. So the Washington Wizards, to me, if I'm doing a tank rank, who could make the biggest leap if they got the number 1 overall pick in this 2026 NBA draft? The Washington Wizards would top my list. But when we return to the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, I'm going to go over some of my other options that I'm really intrigued by if they got the number 1 overall pick. I'm looking at the Utah Jazz, and I'm looking at the Charlotte Hornets. Stay tuned. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, that first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. That's where Gametime comes in. The Gametime app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets, fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Gametime app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy and confident. And prices include fees up front, so the total is clear from the start. Features like zone deals help unlock great seats at even better value. Whether it's an NBA game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today and get in on the action. Welcome back to the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, part of the #1 sports podcasting network, Locked On, your team every day. All right, so as I mentioned before the break, I want to get into the number 2 team that I really feel could benefit just slightly the most behind the Washington Wizards in terms of if they got the number 1 overall pick, how could it change their trajectory within their conference? And I got to say, along with the Wizards and another team I'm going to talk about next, the Hornets, man, the Utah Jazz have been such a fun basketball team to watch, particularly over the last few weeks. Currently where they sit today, they're 26th in net rating, 12th in offense, 29th in defense, and 4th in pace. So this team is really excelling offensively behind the offensive emergence of Keontae George, a third-year guard who is really finding his stride as a do-it-all offensive option for this team. Obviously, they have an established star player in Lauri Markkanen, and then this team has a number of intriguing young options behind them in Ace Bailey. Walker Kessler's out for this year, but he is one of the best rim protectors and rebounders in the front court that we have in the NBA. Walter Clayton Jr. is a rookie guard who's in the mix now. Kyle Filipowski, second-year forward out of Duke. Isaiah Collier, another really interesting point guard option out of USC. And then you still have guys like Taylor Hendricks and Cody Williams who have yet to find their footing and really establish themselves as NBA players, but nonetheless deserve a mention when I'm talking about the Jazz's quote-unquote young core moving forward. So this team, as it stands production-wise, they're 19th in the NBA shooting at the rim. They're 13th in scoring in the mid-range and 19th shooting threes. Defensively, however, they've really felt the effects of not having Kessler for a significant chunk of the season. They're 28th in opponent rim field goal percentage, 30th and 27th respectively in defending mid-range shots and three-point shots. So biggest needs for the Jazz. Obviously, defense is the biggest call out here, whether it be on the perimeter, being able to switch and offer some versatility in the backcourt or on the wing. They really need a solid option at that power forward spot along with someone like Filipowski. And then they could really use a primary or secondary wing scoring option / ball handler, that jumbo wing, to take some pressure off of a Keontae George, off of a Lauri Markkanen. I really think AJ Debance could be the best blend of what the Jazz need. As he improves his reads defensively, like I talked about with the Wizards, he projects to be the best on-ball defender on the wing and on the perimeter at the top of the draft in this class. And he could take a lot of that creation pressure off of Keontae, Lauri, and then Ace Bailey as a real deal operator in the middle of the floor. That's been his best selling point for this BYU team in college already this season. He's gotten off to some slow starts in first halves against Power 5 teams, but especially in the second half when the BYU Cougars have made it a strong point to get AJ Debance the ball in the middle of the floor, have him work out of that mid post, find guys cutting to the basket, spray the ball back out to shooters, let him cook one-on-one in the mid-range. He's been their best offensive option by a significant margin. You add in the fact that BYU is starting to play with a little bit more up-tempo, a little bit more pace as they played some other teams here heading into January. This team's playing at a faster pace. They're getting AJ out in transition. They're putting the ball in his hands, and they're asking him to be a high-usage, high-volume creator, both from a scoring standpoint and from a playmaking standpoint. 30.7% usage rate for AJ currently on the season, a 23.8 assist rate, 11.7 turnover rate. That means he's dishing the ball out to everyone he needs to. He's taking on that primary offensive responsibility, and he's not creating significant mistakes and turning the ball over at a high rate. You want that out of your 6'9" jumbo wing creator, someone who offers that downhill rim pressure. He's getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line at incredible rates for a freshman creator, is making the most out of every single opportunity when he touches the ball offensively right now. That's the kind of jumbo score that this Utah Jazz team could really benefit from. But even if we're not looking at AJ Debance, the other two options, like we talked about, Darren Peterson, he would play so well alongside Keontae George as a secondary ball handler, a handoff option, a pick and roll operator. He can toggle between responsibilities, whether he's on the ball or off the ball, while playing to the team's up-tempo attack as a transition scorer and shooter. This team does not have an option in the backcourt who's as athletic as Darren Peterson, someone who's been compared to some of the greats, at least athletically, when we talk about, how he moves on the court, how he's so explosive. That first step of his, it's 6'5", 6'6". He is an impressive backcourt athlete who would also give this team another very reliable perimeter defender. Going back to his days in high school, he's been one of the best options on the perimeter in terms of creating stocks, that defensive event generation. This guy is awesome at making things happen on both ends of the floor and would really fit alongside Keontae George and even alongside someone like a Walter Clayton incredibly well. And then Cam Boozer would be an ideal front court partner with Walker Kessler. He takes nothing away from the space that Kessler likes to occupy as a dunker spot and lob threat, the high-low possibilities between those two. He's a three-point shooter out of the forward spot, and he plays well to that high-tempo attack of the Jazz because of those transition hit-ahead passes that I outlined earlier. So any three of those guys for the Utah Jazz, if they're inserted into this Jazz lineup, this Jazz team has the future draft picks. They have the financial flexibility. They have some moves to make on this roster, whether they keep Lowry, whether they might trade him for some more depth, some more capital to go make another move. This team has all of the flexibility with the rising and emerging star power of a Keontae George, of what Ace Bailey projects to be as a scorer in the future. This team could make a move in a hurry up the Western Conference standings, potentially getting into that play-in race as soon as next season if they can land one of these top three guys, health permitting. This team's healthy. They're playing effectively together. They make some of those additional moves like I talked about. This could be a scary team in short order in the Western Conference. And then I really quickly want to touch on the Charlotte Hornets as well. Would be the number 3 team. Again, if I'm doing this tank rank as an exercise of if they got the number 1 pick, who could make the most noise in the quickest amount of time, the Charlotte Hornets to me stand out as an intriguing option. They've really gone down a new direction in terms of how they're trying to build out this team, particularly offensively. They're 19th in net rating, 14th in offense behind the brilliance of Con Knippel. They've gotten Brandon Miller back into the mix. LaMelo Ball's playing some good basketball, at least offensively. They figured out a nice blend of playmaking and shooting that's really given this team some quality options and different strategies to work with on that side of the ball. And then defensively, rookie Ryan Kalkbrenner has been one of the best rim protectors and stalwarts in the paint in terms of deterring opposing drivers and shots at the rim in the entire NBA. This guy has been incredibly awesome out of the gate, and he projects to be a long-term building block for this Hornets team defensively as someone they can actually build their schemes on defense around in the future. But I talked about Con Knippel, arguably the NBA's rookie of the year, if not certainly in the top 3 of that race right now. You have Brandon Miller, you have Kalkbrenner, you have Sion James, Tidjane Salaün, Moussa Diabate, Liam McNeely, and then an established star in LaMelo Ball. This team, listen, there's been a lot of rumors. Could the Charlotte Hornets move on from LaMelo Ball? If they did, obviously point guard would stand out as this team's biggest need, but adding some more perimeter defense while not taking away from the other elements that's making this group so awesome to be able to watch. They play off of each other really well. They move the ball. They're unselfish. So injecting some perimeter defense while also making sure the shooting and the playmaking are intact, along with potentially another answer at the power forward spot. If it's not Salaün, if this team moves on from Miles Bridges after this season, what does that power forward position looks like? You know, that front court partner alongside of Ryan Kalkbrenner. But listen, Cam Boozer checks a lot of boxes for the Hornets as someone who could help this team play at a faster pace, given his outlet passing and transition. He makes a 12th in rebounding team even stronger on the offensive and defensive glass. He takes nothing off the table from a shooting perspective. He's an excellent high-low option with one of the league's best lob and interior finishers in Kalkbrenner, who's still shooting like a preposterous almost 80% on twos, which is just ridiculous from a young player. And then that 2-man game, he could work with Con Knippel. Con Knippel is so effective offensively because every single thing he does on the floor is quick. And you see that same quick processing from Cam Boozer. Having 2 of those guys on the court at the same time offensively would be just music to my ears. It would be basketball as Jazz personified. And then Darren Peterson would be the other guy I would really look at. He could replace LaMelo Ball if the team wanted to move on from Ball after this season or even within this season. He's a plug-in option at the point guard position. He can operate and work off of what Con Knippel does best. A pick and roll operator. Con's been used really well in those short rolls. He's been excellent as a roll man scorer per Synergy Sports. He can work that two-man game alongside Con. He provides rim pressure that Con and Brandon Miller don't bring in spades. He can toggle those on-ball, off-ball reps in a more motion, movement-friendly offense, and they can split those ball handling duties very well. Darren Peterson, another option who could really, really help this team move forward on offense and make this team rise up the Eastern Conference standings in short order just by bringing more of that offensive blend, either Darren or Cam, bringing more of that offensive blend that the Hornets are looking for to round out this team, as well as providing some much needed perimeter defense if we're talking about someone like a Peterson going into that half court. So when we come back to the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast, I'm going to very quickly touch on what's going on in Brooklyn and talk about how teams like the Thunder and the Spurs, the rich could be getting richer in the 2026 NBA draft. Stay tuned. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel's making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new: boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move right before the window closes. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, a little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Draft and No Ceilings podcast your first listen of the day. All right, just touching very quickly what's going on in Brooklyn. Everyone would have expected me to talk about the Brooklyn Nets first overall in the tank rank. I would have them fourth if we're going through the top four spots, the teams that, if I were looking at each of these rosters, each of these franchises, the assets they have, the young cores that are in place, the building blocks that exist, if they got the number one overall pick, who could make the biggest leap, the biggest turnaround, the quickest? There's an argument to still be made for Brooklyn in that regard. It's a New York market. It's a big market. This franchise has not been afraid to make big swings, especially if they, backdoor themselves into at least one talented player. Could they maybe package some other assets, make a big swing at another star player, and really put themselves in the middle of the Eastern Conference? That possibility exists, but in terms of what's going on in Brooklyn, I'm just not sure that whether they bring in someone like an AJ or a Darren or a Cam, are they making a significant run up the Eastern Conference standings into that play-in territory, potentially getting into a playoff spot? I'm not necessarily sure from an offensive perspective. One thing I do want to call out, though, even though this team is 25th in net rating, 26th in offense, 17th in defense this season, the Brooklyn Nets are first in defensive rating during the month of December. So this team has played much better on the defensive side of the floor. Obviously, having a front court pairing like Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharpe when he's coming off the bench, that mix of bigs has really helped solidify this defense. Yegor Dioman has been pretty good as a rookie point guard, point guard / wing, backcourt threat, however you want to categorize him offensively. He's done a pretty good job on the perimeter, holding his own on defense. Obviously, there's some matchups that are going to take advantage of him because as a rookie, he'll get better, he'll get stronger, but I really like what I've seen from him defensively at this point in the season. Michael Porter Jr. has been outstanding this year as a two-way player. Cam Thomas has missed a significant chunk of the season, but in the 9 games that he's played, he's been pretty good. I mentioned Nick Claxton as the defensive leader on this team. If I'm the Brooklyn Nets, I'm really hoping that I get the number one overall pick and I can choose Darren Peterson. He's the most logical option for this team. I know he's another guard / backcourt player, but he projects as a 3-level scorer who can operate in the pick and roll. He can toggle on off ball like I've talked about. He just provides an athletic two-way element that the Nets don't have from some of these other backcourt options. He adds an immediate injection of volume, catch and shoot. He can attack opposing defenses on the break as the type of athlete that he can grab his own rebound. He can push, and he can initiate the break or score all by himself. I know AJ DeBanza brings a lot of those same elements to the table in a bigger jumbo wing package as well, but he doesn't immediately add that same value as a three-point shooter at volume that can help this team really find a better identity from deep. And then Cam Boozer, he offers an incredibly safe floor. He's an additional building block for the Nets, depending on how this team operates moving forward with that front court like I talked about. You have Claxton, you have Clowney, you have guys like Day'Ron Sharpe, you even have Danny Wolf, who's a rookie guy who's been pretty impressive in the minutes that he's gotten as a front court playmaker, very creative passer, can shoot the basketball. But Cam Boozer would add that three-point shooting that this team needs given his projections and his trajectory from high school. He adds to the team's half-court passing element as a hub in the middle of the floor. He doesn't jump off the page as the quote-unquote first option with that number 1 overall pick, but he would continue to bring a lot of stability and a true basketball identity to a team that needs a sense of direction, very similar to what the Charlotte Hornets did last draft with the 2025 NBA draft class. The Hornets ultimately decided to just choose basketball players who didn't take anything off the table. They knew their roles. They could all fit around a team-first identity, and look at how that team's moving forward. I still think Charlotte could benefit more from the number 1 overall pick in terms of rising up the standings quicker than someone like Brooklyn. So if Brooklyn would take that approach, if they got the number 1 pick, they won with someone like a Cam Boozer, even in Darren Peterson and AJ DeBanza to an extent, but really getting one of those 3 guys to just establish an identity moving forward would be huge for this franchise. I did mention that I would just very quickly touch on, the OKC Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs, the rich potentially getting richer in a draft class that has a deep lottery of prospects. There's plenty of guards to go around that are rated highly. Caleb Wilson has really done his job in North Carolina, the athletic forward, 6'10", to make this a potential 4-man race as opposed to a 3-man race. But listen, the OKC Thunder have a chance at 2 lottery picks, depending on how the LA Clippers and Utah Jazz finish out the season. The Spurs could very well get into the lottery if that Atlanta Hawks pick falls inside that top 14. They have that unprotected swap. They could get into the lottery. If those teams got their hands on any of these projected picks, like a Caleb Wilson, a Kingston Flemings out of Houston, a LeBaron Philon out of Alabama, Michael Brown out of Louisville, Christian Anderson has really come on for Texas Tech, explosive offensive shooting-oriented guard, and then support players like a Koa Pete out of Arizona, Hans Steinbach, big front court guy, awesome rebounder, strong interior finisher, some shooting upside from him forward out of Washington, explosive guard Darius Acuff at Arkansas, Yaxel Lendenborg, the forward from Michigan, has really come on strong as a potential lottery option, a veteran guy. I mean, if the Thunder or the Spurs were able to benefit from really falling anywhere in the lottery, forget the number 1 overall pick odds, right? If they fall anywhere in this lottery, getting 1 or even 2 picks, I mean, the rich can just keep getting richer. It's insane to think about that either one of those 2 teams could walk away with 1 or 2 lottery picks. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching or listening to us in the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings podcast feed. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us at No Ceilings NBA on social media to make sure that you're locked in for all of our content and latest episodes. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.